At the start of 2001, Enron was the blueprint for large corporations, boasting 30,000 employees and an annual revenue of $100 billion. But by the end of the year, the company had garnered the title of biggest bankruptcy of all time, while Arthur Andersen, one of the Big Five, suffered a similar fate for their part in the scandal. So how did the energy giant, once valued at $70 billion, go from winning Fortune's most innovative company for 6 years in a row to bankrupt in the space of just a few months? Here's a story of fraud, corruption, and serious mismanagement. Here's how it happened. For some background, Enron was founded as a result of a merger between energy firm InterNorth and utility company Houston Natural Gas back in 1985. American Ken Lay was appointed CEO, and legendary artist Paul Rand, who also made the logos for IBM, UPS, and ABC, designed the now infamous Enron E. The energy market underwent significant deregulation throughout the 80s and 90s, leading to extremely volatile prices and a belief that anything was possible as companies rode the bull market that followed 1987's Black Monday. Enron then opened its own trading subsidiary to maximize profitability, and Jeffrey Skilling was appointed CEO of Enron Capital and Trade in 1991. Skilling oversaw the introduction of mark-to-market accounting within the corporation. That is the practice of valuing your assets based on predictions of their future prices rather than on historical prices. And in short, it basically gave Enron the right to decide their own profits, without being held accountable for the accuracy of the valuations. Based on these optimistic calculations, Enron's revenue figures began to skyrocket as the 90s wore on. The firm was named as Fortune's best company to work for in 2000, as its stock price peaked at $90 a share, and its directors outlined their expectation of even further profits in the near future. As Enron invested hundreds of millions more into projects both in the US and overseas, the company was able to hide these losses behind false estimations of the new asset's value, like a power plant in the northeast of England. To cover any reported losses or cash flow issues, Enron would borrow money from its SPVs, special purpose vehicles, which were subsidiaries of the corporation capitalized with Enron stock, making it impossible for the lenders to retrieve their money if the energy company was struggling. The crashing of the dot-com bubble in 2000 hit Enron's assets hard, as they had now diversified into industries like video on demand and high-speed broadband networks. Investors were becoming more cautious and increasingly skeptical of the firm's complex business model, and by early 2001, serious questions were being asked of Enron's financial statements. Lay stepped down as CEO in February to be replaced by Skilling, with Enron's stock price halving to $40 in the 6 months that followed. Amid widespread speculation about the company's accounting methods, Skilling stepped down from his new role in August 2001. As Lay returned to his former position, analysts were downgrading Enron's stock rating, and Lay began selling millions of dollars worth of his shares in the firm. In October, Enron announced its first quarterly loss in 4 years thanks to taking charges of $1 billion from its underperforming assets, and the SEC began a formal investigation into its financial statements. During November, the company revealed it had overstated its profits by $591 million between 1997 and 2000. Meanwhile, over 20,000 of its employees' 401k pension plans were locked for 30 days due to a change in administrator. A merger was agreed with close competitor Dynegy, but was called off due to concerns that Enron was still lacking transparency in its off-balance sheet debt. And on the 30th of November, the company's stock price hit rock bottom at just 26 cents a share, down from $80 back in February. And Enron filed for bankruptcy protection 2 days later on the 2nd of December, marking less than a year since it became the 7th biggest corporation in the United States. Thousands of employees lost their jobs and their life savings, and shareholders eventually sued banks like JP Morgan Chase and Citigroup for conducting deals with Enron, later winning $7.2 billion that was shared among the 1.5 million victims. Several executives went on trial for a range of charges related to the company's nefarious activity, including Lay and Skilling, who were charged with a total of 39 counts of fraud and conspiracy between them in January 2006, to all of which they pleaded not guilty. Lay died of a heart attack before the sentencing, but Skilling was sentenced to 24 years, of which he served 12 before being released in 2019. Not exempt from punishment were Enron's auditors, Arthur Andersen, who were one of the Big Five accounting firms, and also had their reputation dragged through the mud for their compliance in the fraud. They were found guilty of destroying documents that were of relevance to the SEC, which was caused to void their auditing license and leave the firm with no choice but to close. Hence their absence from the Big Four we know today, although their consultancy branch does still remain in operation as Accenture. The fiasco saw the United States Senate impose much tighter regulations to prevent a repeat in future, namely the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which created a board to oversee audit reports for public companies and strict controls on what services these auditors could provide, not to mention the requirement for executives to sign off on all financial reports, meaning they could no longer plead ignorance to their firm's wrongdoings. Undoubtedly, the effects of the Enron scandal are still felt in the finance industry today, so let us know your thoughts and what you think the next Enron might be. And that's how it happened. Thanks for watching.
Good morning. How are we today? Happy Monday, March 10th, 2025. So thank you for being with us, and I hope you watched the previous video again. I think I'm going to make every single video start with that as a refresher on where we are with, as a reminder of what Enron represented in the similarities between that and Eversource. So last week, if you want to know more details, we did about a 30-minute uncovering of why I'm accusing Eversource of being the new Enron of 2025. And when we looked at all the complicated matters, there were really 4 big items that we were looking at that kind of made it similar for me. And so if we looked at those 4, the first one was fake revenue. All right, so we've got in Enron's case, we had mark-to-market accounting, which allowed them to predict future contracts and agreements and put them on the book as revenue. And in Eversource's case, we have revenue decoupling mechanisms, which pretty much operate the same exact way. They have agreements with the states, they can dictate their price, and then the states have to meet those requirements. They can put it on their books as revenue. So both of them operated some interesting accounting principles that allowed them to not look at operations as far as their revenue is concerned, but agreements and future projections, both of which we're going to show are dangerous. The second thing that we talked about was a complex web of subsidiaries. So we have this complex web of subsidiaries that can carry debt. In Enron's case, we had the CFO who was offloading debt onto offshore subsidiaries to make the books look good. And in Eversource's case, we also operate a complex web of subsidiaries where that carry debt as well. The third thing was monopoly. Through a series of strategic moves, Enron and Eversource have managed to create an energy monopoly in the areas that they operate. In Enron's case, it was the West Coast, Texas, California, etc. And in Eversource's case, it's Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. And then the fourth thing, and this is the big one right here. In this case, what we're doing is we're borrowing from the future to pay the debts of today. In Eversource's case, we're seeing some interesting things. Now, it's difficult because we don't have access to the books, but what you do is you look at the actions that they're taking. And we can see that they have notes out till, I think it's like 2035. And we also see the offloading of assets like the water plant that they have, Aquatica. I got to look up the name of that. I forgot to look that up. But also pushing back of already scheduled projects, like the $500 million project in Connecticut. Singly, none of these would raise any alarms, but when you look at the combination of the actions that they're taking, it really does appear as if they're borrowing from the future to pay the debts of today. And that's also on top of the fact that they are $28 or $26 billion in debt today on an upward curve. The debt exceeds the value of the stock right now at this point. If you want to know more in detail, go back last Monday on my profile, whether it's X, Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, and you can go back and see the video there. It's a much more in-depth about these four items here. But if you take a look at what the next steps were from last week, we had a let's go. We had some steps that we had put together on things that we're going to do in order to continue to push people to move us in the right direction. Because when Enron went down, I mean, it was a huge scandal, and it didn't take long. Once the house of cards came tumbling down, it was only a few months before they went bankrupt. And so it's hard because I'm making a lot of accusations here, but I feel like they're in a debt cycle. In this debt cycle, they're borrowing from the future to pay the current debts. And I also think that the credit rating agencies and and some of our state regulators are complicit in this action, because the credit rating agencies need to keep the stock above junk bond status. And institutional investors are known to put pressure on these credit rating agencies. And what we've seen is that they've got a BBB+. And I don't understand that. So let's take a look at from last week. These were the action items that I had put up last week, are things that we needed to do. So the first one was to file FOIA requests in order to get more detailed information, stuff that's non-public, right? Then we needed to notify key regulatory bodies and lawmakers, and then engage the media and public to increase pressure. So there's 3 of these action items that we've made some movement on this week. The potential for class action lawsuits, this one right here, we haven't moved on that one. That's more of a down the road thing. But what we have done is we filed some FOIA requests. We've notified key regulatory bodies and lawmakers. and we've engaged the public using social media. So let's talk about that. So last week we sent 17 letters. We sent letters to the SEC, the FTC, the DOJ, the FERC, the 3 credit rating agencies, Moody's, S&P, and Fitch, 6 state senators, that's Warren, Markey, Shaheen, Blumenthal, Murphy, etc. I'm sorry if I forgot a couple of you. And FOIA requests to the state regulators, the DPU, the PURA, and the PUC. That's the 3 regulatory bodies over Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. So let's take a quick look at those. All right. So like I said, we sent these. Now, when I checked the status of these this morning, it looks like the regulators, the PURA, PUC, and the DPU have gotten these letters already. And so let's see if I can find that. All right. So as you can see here, what we're requesting is some information about all the rate increases, the justifications, any memos, any communications between the DP regulatory body and Eversource, customer complaint data, power purchase agreements, and energy market behavior. This is the PPAs I want to see because I believe that this is one of those borrowing from the future mechanisms. Any infrastructure spending, transmission cuts, investment delays, we want all the data there. And once again, the correspondence between Eversource and the state regulators. We request a fee waiver. Now, you'll notice that the head of this states the lead investigator for Citizens Against Eversource and the president of the Massachusetts chapter of DOGE. Several months ago, I tried to apply for DOGE. The problem is that between DDoS and fake applications, the site was basically nullified. And I started to investigate, like, what does the average citizen have for power to be able to investigate? And honestly, most of us have the power of an IG minus some very sensitive data, national security stuff. We can request all this stuff. Doge isn't a particular company to me. It's an ideology. We are all Doge. We are all Doge. And so there's no sense for us to back off and wait for somebody to investigate. We can do this on our own. So when you see Doge, I am the acting president in Massachusetts for the chapter of Doge, and I'm fine with that. And I don't think I need permission for that, and I'm going to continue to name myself that. The other thing is Citizens Against Eversource. So interesting story. I had, in my investigation a couple of weeks ago, my wife had given me a heads up. She says, you need to join this Facebook group, Citizens Against Eversource. And so I looked it up online, and when I looked at it, the head was Elijah D'Souza, my neighbor. So we were both on the same path. I had taken a different route looking at the how the wind farms had exacerbated the already, basically very unstable structure of Eversource's finances, and he was coming at it directly from the consumer protection high rates perspective, but we both kind of met right in the middle. So I started collaborating with him. So technically I work with him now, or for him. I consider him the head of Citizens Against Eversource. But we've gone ahead and we've sent this letter. So these, as I can see today, the certified letters have made it to these regulatory bodies. For us, it's Jordan in Massachusetts. He's head of the DPU. I'm interested to see the length of time it takes them to respond and what we get back from this. These are the senators that we sent this certified letter to. These haven't reached DC yet, but they're en route. I think they said shortly, within the next day or so, they should be reaching their destination. But basically what we're asking for here is we're asking for investigation. And this one I really call on Warren, who, between her work with Dodd-Frank and her consumer protection behavior, this should be up her alley. This should be something that she should grab onto. And so we ask for them to review the monopoly-like behavior, the questionable finances, the rate hikes, which were extremely aggressive, and we're asking for action from them. The next group of letters were the SEC. Right, so we're asking for them to We're looking at the enforcement division. We want them to once again investigate. The 3 credit rating agencies. This one is another FOIA request. And what I want to know is, I want to understand the methodology by which gave them a BBB plus rating. Now, hopefully there's integrity in credit rating agencies, but 2008 housing financial crisis proved otherwise. The investor pressure, the institutional investor pressure kept them from downgrading. If you remember the CDOs, these were repackaged financial instruments that, although full of low quality home loans, were still given a AAA rating. The PCAOB, this was the investigative body that was created, or the body that was created because of Enron. This is the one that's supposed to be enforcing the SOX Acts, or the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. So this letter was sent out last week too. So we're requesting an investigation. FTC, once again, Federal Trade Commission, the FERC, and the United States Department of Justice. Now, since the FOIA requests have been received, when I look at the dates, basically, if we have basically till April 1st. It's a waiting game at this point. Each state has different response times. We have actions after April 1st that we're prepared to take in the event of, which is more filing complaints with the Secretary of State, a FOIA complaint with the FOIC in Connecticut, and Superior Court filings in New Hampshire. So depending on the response time and speed and what we get for an answer, we're already investigating and working on the next steps, because I'm working under the assumption that we're not going to get responses. We're a small group, so I'm expecting that. So we're preparing, you know, they say, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That's the level that we're going with this. As far as the engaging media and public to increase pressure, this has already been going on. So the Citizens Against Eversource is one of the fastest growing Facebook movements. I think they did over almost 30,000 in a month of subscribers, and this is across the 3 states, and they are active, very active. And we're trying to make sure from there that we're educating and getting them engaged to meet the meetings. So it's the engagement there has been great, and we've also signed up for another group. This one's the Connecticut one. Let me get the name of that. Where was it? It's the Ban Public Benefits Charge Eversource UI Connecticut. So we're already in 2 states now as far as social media groups are concerned. And let me tell you, I'd never seen such asinine stuff in my life as far as the pricing that these people, you know, or old people who are on fixed incomes, who have had their bills double and triple over the course of a year for this fugazi, for paying basically institutional investors to pay the dividends and debts. So we have done that, and we've notified key regulatory bodies and lawmakers. So we've noticed the FTC, the SEC, the DOJ, all state senators. We've let them know that we know the how and the why. That's where we're looking right now. So we've made some significant move on this. We're going to be in a holding pattern for the next couple of weeks as we wait for the responses from both the regulatory bodies and the lawmakers. So we'll continue to have this call at 10 a.m. on Monday, and we're going to continue to provide updates on the notification we received. I expect some responses this week. Some of these states require that you at least notify the receipt of the letters, and since the 3 regulatory bodies, the DPU, the PUC, and the PURA, have received them, I'm expecting something this week, even as soft we've received your FOIA request for review. So, I mean, that's it. So we've made some movement. We're continuing to move forward. We're preparing for the worst if we don't receive the information, and we're continuing to put that public pressure on. I would advise that you get on social media, identify a group that's in your local area. You know, your sphere of influence is local, so be local, be active, and look for those meetings, those public hearings from Eversource, where they're disseminating information and getting votes to push in through some of these rate hikes. So that's this week's update. I thank you for your time, and hopefully we continue to put the pressure on these people. I feel like this house is coming down. The amount of outcry that I've seen from the people just in the last week alone, it's absolutely amazing. I want to give a big shout out to Elijah D'Souza and the banned public charges on the for Eversource in Connecticut for letting me use their platform and share these videos with. Once again, I'm Kevin Millett, the New Bedford Nostradamus, and I've spoken.